Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first webinar of Lucentum Basketball Hub on 2026. Happy New Year. We start this new year on a very high note, having a very, very special guest. I will stay at the door, being the good host and letting more people in, as they will for sure join us. And those who cannot do it, they will definitely enjoy this webinar with Coach Brad Greenberg. That will be uploaded to our Google Drive platform and from next month to our YouTube channel. And by the way, you can subscribe to Lucentum Basketball Hub YouTube channel. So, Coach, very, very excited and very thankful to have you here with us. How how is 2026 treating you? How did you start this year?
I'm a lucky guy. I have a second home with my wife in a place called St. Simon's Island in the state of Georgia, and it's a beautiful, beautiful town. And so I get up in the morning, take a nice walk, look out at the ocean. You know, uh, have a leisurely day most of the time. Uh, Play a lot of tennis. So at my age, I'm enjoying myself. This is the first full year that I have not coached a team, so it's been a little bit different to not be packing my bags to go somewhere. Um, but I'm enjoying it. Every once in a while, I think I got to get back on the sidelines, and I have some gas in the tank left, but then other days I think it's a pretty nice life. So I'm appreciative of it.
Let's see what the new year will bring you. Who knows, Coach? Who knows? It will be a pleasure, to see you again on the sidelines if basketball will bring this into your life once again. But tell me, when people hear NBA executive, international champion coach, what's the story behind that journey? In if you can explain to us in 1 minute.
Well, you'll have to bear with me. I don't think I can do it in 1 minute. So have a little patience with me on that. I was lucky, and I'll say that frequently, I'm sure, during this conversation. But my father played college basketball in the 1940s after World War II at Long Island University for a Hall of Fame coach by the name of Claire B. So I was introduced to the game at a very young age. And as a result, I got a head start on it as a player, which enabled me to then, be recruited to play in college. And I just met all these people while I was playing in college, at basketball camps, working as a counselor. Um, and then later on, I had a chance to play collegiately for a fellow named George Raveling, who was a famous coach here in the U.S., and my mentor, Jim Lynham, who went on to coach a number of NBA teams. Um, and I just had a chance to be networking and be part of a basketball community at a very young age. And I just thought, this is what I want to do. I want to figure out a way to stay involved in this game if I can. And again, I was just very fortunate that I had a mentor in Jim Lynham. I had a chance to network with, all the giants of the game that were involved in coaching in college and then the NBA. And I've had a chance to wear a lot of different hats, from being a college assistant to later on being a college head coach, to being in the international game, to be in the management side of things. And I've enjoyed all of them. So I've been, just so lucky to have what I would describe as a lot of once in a lifetime experiences, more than my fair share. So it's just been a good ride to get me, 40 plus years in the business.
We tend to say we are the sum of our experiences, right? And you already mentioned some turning points and maybe a life turning point, but You had also plenty of career turning points. If you could remember or indicate to us, when was the first moment that you said, I can lead a team, not just coach a team? When that happened?
It's hard to pinpoint, when that evolution took place. Again, working in the summers at a place like the Five-Star Basketball Camp, which at that time, was as good as it gets. I mean, I have a sample daily practice or schedule of the camp and the teaching stations, and they were manned by, at one session of camp, manned by five future NBA head coaches, are working, outdoors on blacktop courts in 90-degree weather to teach basketball. So, you gain some confidence when you're in the mix with that many high caliber people, and you're thinking back, well, what am I doing in here? But I'm part of this group. So you're naturally confident. But I would probably say when I was a college assistant coach and my mentor, Jim Lynham, had just moved to the Portland Trailblazers. And I would work the LA Summer Pro League, which is now Las Vegas Summer Pro League. But back then they used to have a free agent division. And on my own dime, I went to LA and worked in these free agent tryout camps and then had a chance to coach a team in the league. So picture the Las Vegas Summer League now and picture a free agent team, not connected to any NBA teams, coached by just some guy. So I was that guy coaching, a free agent team in the league against the NBA teams. And my mentor was now an assistant coach with the Trailblazers under Jack Ramsey. And, he saw me coaching a team and just said, yeah, you can do it. You can do it. Now, that wasn't necessarily so much leadership. That was just carrying yourself a certain way. But as far as leadership, I would point to maybe one incident when I was a head coach in college at Radford University. My second year, we had an incident during a practice where a player just lost control a little bit and just was acting, crazy, yelling at some of his teammates and things like that. And, it wasn't the first time that he acted out, but this was at a different level. So I don't like that kind of confrontation, but I had to excuse him from the practice. So we had to send him out. And then I had to make a decision after that. Like, was that such an egregious act against the concept of team where one player had such inappropriate behavior that you needed to do more than just, slap him on the wrist? So we were about to go on a 2-game road trip, and I met with 2 of the veteran players on the team, the senior players. And I said, we're not going to take him on the road. He's going to sit back home for these 2 games, and then we'll figure out what the next step is. And I met with those guys again while we were on the road. And I said, what do you guys think? And they said, it's up to you, coach. We're fine, whatever your decision is. Like, they didn't stick up for their teammate. And I took that as a sign that this was maybe, season threatening to have this element in the practices. And I made the decision while we were on the road, he's done. It's sad. He's not a bad person, but I can't have this in the gym. I can't walk into the gym every day, try to lead a group when I've just allowed this guy to do something, very inappropriate, attacking some of his players. So I think by establishing that, there's a certain behavior that's expected. Nobody is entitled to anything. You have to follow certain standards, certain rules, if you want to be part of a group. And I think that's where it was established in my mind that team, is what it's all about. I mean, you cannot have a team if you have, somebody that acts inappropriately, that thinks they're entitled to a certain type of behavior because they might be one of the better players. And we went on to win almost all of our remaining games and made the NCAA tournament that year. So it turned out to be the right decision. It was unfortunate for this player, but you can never let anything take away from what's the most important thing, and that's the value of being a team, the connectedness of a true team. I think when you lead from that perspective, you usually leave the gym every day after practice feeling pretty good.
Definitely standing by your values. It's it says a lot about you as a person, and actually, we sometimes we believe that, yeah, okay, professional side and personal side, but there is a very important link between who you are as a person and then who you will be as a coach. Cannot be two different personas, in my opinion. But uh, I want to ask you, crossing the ocean so many times, so many times, right? I mean, you told us about that suitcase that maybe you have it somewhere, somewhere in the in your office ready to go. You cross the ocean so many times, and your career, I mean, includes NBA, NCAA, and very high level international leagues. What did Europe teach you that maybe the US basketball game didn't?
Well, my very first experience internationally was as the assistant coach of the Venezuelan national team, working with Eric Musselman. And 2 to 3 days before I was going to fly to Caracas, Eric called me up and said, I was just playing basketball with my son and I tore my Achilles. So I don't know if I can go. I have to make a decision. If I have surgery, then I won't be able to fly for a while. If I don't have surgery and treat this, with a different way, I can get there in a couple of days. But you're going to have to go and start things off. So I think I'm going to be walking into a gym with a whole bunch of players in a facility that's perfect for training. And when I got there, the gym was an old arena, but half the floor was warped because of a flood that had spread in the gym. So we were going to practice with the national team on half court and didn't even have, anything really set up. Later on, when I coached the Kosovo national team, I can remember having to really encourage the people to get heat in the building and have lights on when we showed up to shoot. So I think one of the first things I learned from international basketball was to focus on good things and your job, as opposed to being distracted by things like, well, you're not going to be able to go full court today because the floor is broken on one end of the court. Well, then figure it out. Be resilient enough, creative enough to figure out. That shouldn't stop you. It's not like you're going to, I can't do this. No, you can do it. You'll do it a little differently, but you can do it. So I think you have to be resilient, and coaching internationally versus, having the benefit of good facilities. And, there's junior high school gyms in the United States that are better than what teams are practicing in Kosovo right now, in Venezuela. So, you gotta be able to deal with stuff that isn't perfect and not have it whack you out, deter you from doing your job, because you can still do it. So you have to be creative. If you only have 7 guys for practice because 4 of them are injured or whatever, well, then you're going to play a lot of 3-on-3. You're going to break things down. You're going to work on individual skills. You're going to get something positive out of the hour and a half, 2 hours that you're working. Is it perfect? Are you going to be limited? Yeah, but it teaches you that this is where you are. Figure it out.
Coach, if you would take us to, to a tour of your house, and if you will show us your office, what would be the photo or maybe a trophy that would stand on that immediately we will be like, wow, we will have a wow moment.
Back in my house in Virginia, not where I'm at right now, I do have a man cave. I have a downstairs uh, that has walls filled with some memorabilia and some things. One of the ones that's most prominently displayed would be the championship like trophy being held up from the Europe Cup. Uh, Along with some of the import players that were on that team and myself, which was a memorable achievement in an interesting year that was COVID affected. That would be one, but I would have. It's funny you say that because I would have. There's a couple of photos of me when I played in college and some photos of my father from 1946 playing in Madison Square Garden, LIU against the University of Oregon, and some pictures of his college team. And it reminds me, my father, again, played at the highest level back then, right after the war, when Madison Square Garden, the old Madison Square Garden in New York, would be filled with 20,000 people, all wearing black suits with thin ties. That's how people dressed back then when they went to a game.
Like for
Um,
church, the respect for the
yeah,
game, right?
yeah. And my father never tried to really coach me, but he would sit in the stands when I was a young player, and I could hear his voice above all else. If I wasn't aggressive on the court, and I would hear the words, get in the game, get in the game. Um, and when I see that picture of my father playing in Madison Square Garden, he is playing defense, like about to lunge for a steal, about to like be involved in the game. And I've always carried that with me, the idea that don't be a spectator, get in the game. And if you're in the game, make sure you have some sort of impact on it. And that's something that I always carry with me to my teams. When they're on the court, like don't just be on the court. Anybody can be a spectator and stand in a spot and not do anything, or guard the ball and let the guy with the ball go wherever he wants and just be passively guarding him. Impact the game. People have to know you're out there somehow. You can't allow yourself to be part of the game but not in it. So I always look at those pictures that are of my dad in Madison Square Garden, and then one of the pictures is of me when I was a college player playing in Madison Square Garden. So it was just like validation that I, at least for a small moment there, I got in the game for real. That I actually played on the Garden floor, which was, if you grow up in New York, the idea of actually playing on Madison Square Garden floor is something pretty special.
So it was that feeling like what goes around comes back around for the Greenberg family. So now beautiful, and thank you for opening the door to your man's cave or to your your office, because that was exactly the transition for the next chapter that I have here with the championship building. You did it with Maccabi Haifa. You did it with Nes Ziona, the championship that you just mentioned. But that championship with Haifa became historic. What do you think were the two, three pillars of that success? And what was maybe the biggest culture challenge that season for you? It was the first time in Israel, right?
It was, yes, yes. That was my first season in Israel, and Haifa was owned by a fellow named Jeff Rosen at the time, and they had struggled the previous season. They had, I think, had come in last, but for some reason there was no relegation that season in the Israeli Winter League. And Jeff, to his credit, wanted to have a stronger team. And as we were building it, he allowed us to pursue some higher level players than they had maybe played with, or more high level players. So I think the first thing about Haifa in that season was we had good players. We ended up having what many would consider,
You
a
cannot win
very
without good players, right? I mean, you cannot do it without good players. Impossible.
you cannot, and we had good players. So the idea that Jeff Rosen was aggressive in wanting to do it, and the players we selected uh, had talent. We had what turned out to be the best player in the league, Dante Smith, who was an NBA talent who just didn't have maybe enough discipline to be in the NBA, but was, just a special player. We had a little guard named Paul Stoll who had played in Venezuela and has played forever, still
Mexico,
playing.
amazing. He played
Yeah,
VTB so many years.
yeah. And Paul was just the feistiest, toughest little guy who, with a chip on his shoulder, but a positive chip. Uh, we had Pat Calathis, the brother of Nick, who was a very good 6'9" all-around player. James Thomas, who played in the NBA, was a great rebounder. And then in the middle of the year, we picked up Gal Mekel, who was one of the best Israeli players of all time. So we had good players, but I think what would surprise people about that team, we had played Maccabi Tel Aviv 5 times before we had to play them in the championship game. We had lost all 5. So most people thought this would be a walkover for Maccabi. They'd beaten us 5 times. But in the Cup championship, we had them down, and we lost it in the last minute or so. It was devastating. So our team, despite losing all those games, they felt we could beat them. And in fact, at that point in the season, Maccabi was out of the EuroLeague playoffs. And they were fooling around with their lineup a lot during the year, and we were pretty solid. At that point, when we got ready to play that championship game, we were as good as them. Like our play, well, Dante Smith was going to be the best player on the court in that game. James Thomas could play against Sean James, no problem. Pat Calathis could play against Lior Eliyahu, no problem. Paul Stoll could play against those guards. Gal Mekel was as good as all those guards. So our team, despite having gotten beaten 5 times, played, or at least felt very confident, which would seem crazy, but we went into that game thinking, yeah, we can beat these guys. Now it helped us also. The league had decided way back that Haifa would be the site for the championship game, not Tel Aviv. So we ended up playing that game on our home court, which probably aided us a little bit. But we had a heck of a team, and in that moment, we were the best team, and we had the best player too, who controlled good portions of that game. But it was a good memory, and it was an important thing for the city of Haifa. And in some ways, I felt great, but also I didn't realize the magnitude of it, because here I was, this American in Haifa for the first time, in Israel for the first time, and I didn't realize what it meant to the people, how important it was to the people. So that was kind of eye-opening for me.
When did you realize it? What was the moment?
I think after at the final buzzer, when people stormed the court, and then walking around Haifa, and the next day, and everybody recognizing you, and you just realize this was more than just a game to these people. And Maccabi Tel Aviv's footprint on Israeli basketball is. It back then, I don't think they had lost, but 2 or 3 times in the previous 50 years. So it was something that I didn't even realize to what degree it might mean, to the people of Haifa and Israeli basketball at the time.
Mm. And 8 years later, you came back for to another. You came back on the winning spots with another club with another surprise. We can say, right, Nes Ziona in FIBA Europe Cup, and you are telling us about that photo, beautiful photo. We also published it when we presented you for this webinar. Winning a European title is rare, right? I mean, what adjustments, for example, because now I mean, at that moment, you already had experience of the Israeli league, also, of course, playing European competitions. But what adjustments you did to organize your staff and the team to be prepared on battling on two fronts, to say like that, the Winners' League and the FIBA Europe Cup?
I'd like to say that I had some sort of special, method to how we adjusted between playing in the domestic league and playing, in the cup. But we really didn't. I would say the biggest adjustments we did make, and I have to give credit to Mayor Tapiro and Yaniv Mizrahi, our president and really like GM, because we were a bad team at the beginning of the year. I mean, we made mistakes with some of the players that we brought in. We didn't have anything resembling a team, a connected group at all. We had, unfortunately, some players that I would describe as being, selfish and more concerned about their role and how many shots or points or minutes they were going to get versus what was best for the team. And we had to break the team up because we were going nowhere in the league. And we were in bad shape. In fact, I went to practice one day before I got on the court. Mayor was there with the president, and they asked to meet with me. And I thought, well, they're going to probably fire me today, so I'll be on my way home by the afternoon. But they just were concerned and wanted to know, what can we do? Can we fix this? So the adjustment really had nothing to do with domestic league versus, the cup. It had to do with we got to make some changes, hopefully positive changes. Change is sometimes necessary, but you got to make sure that it's going to be, to get some real benefits from it. And we were lucky. We kept Patrick Miller, who was a very good guard. But we picked up Brian Angola, who is a terrific guard. And I guess he just signed, from what I understand, to play in the EuroLeague again.
Yeah, he moved to Asvel, I think, like 2 days ago. And Patrick Miller, I wanted to sign him as a rookie, but I had no chance. He moved to Besiktas, and then Besiktas sent him to play in second division. But well, hell of a player, Patrick.
Oh, terrific. And a great guy, a real high character guy. So we had him, we had Brian Angola, we had Jerome Mayinse, who was a player who played in a lot of South American leagues. And Jerome is one of the better big man defenders I've ever had the pleasure of working with. He could guard ball screens as well as anybody. And in Israel and in Europe, period, if you can't guard a middle ball screen effectively, if you can't figure out how to do that, you got a problem. With Jerome, you could figure it out. He could fake at guys. He could sort of play what I call an active corral, or an active drop, where he could feint at the guy coming off the screen and get back to his man, and like very few people could. So we had him. We had Wayne Selden on the team, who was a talented enough and confident enough player to make a game-winning shot in the semifinals of the Final Four for the Cup. And then we had a couple of Israelis that were good players: Tal Dunn, Nimi Levy, and Leo Carrera. So we were like 7, 8 deep max. But we had good players. We didn't have anything special as far as adjustments because of the different level of play. And again, it was a different kind of season that year because of the COVID epidemic. We traveled to Poland first, I think, and then to the Netherlands for to play in like a little bubble to make our way to the Final Four. So it was fun. It was a fun thing. And again, to see the arena in Israel, support us, and how important it was for the city of Nes Ziona to win a European title that's first ever. It was similar to the Haifa experience, where you got to see just a city enjoy something they didn't expect, which is kind of neat. That's one of the neat things about sports. It has the ability to unify a lot of people, and I've had a chance to have that happen those two times, and also when coaching the Kosovo national team was to actually qualify for the round of 32 for the whatever that was, the World Cup. That was kind of neat. They weren't expecting that. I coached Kosovo, and they had never won a game in FIBA competition ever. They'd only been a country for a couple of seasons. So when I got there and we actually beat Macedonia and beat Estonia, it was to see the city of Pristina get excited about that was pretty cool.
Coach, you named the importance of building the roster, of making the moves, making the right moves in the right moments, right? Shifting during the season. Um, let's stress on this topic with the championship teams, and let's move a little bit, like to use also the NBA model for championship teams from Jack McCluskey, and I love this example because his Pistons won back to back without having, I believe, one single player drafted in the top 10 picks, and not some super trades. But still, they won back to back in a time of Lakers and Boston's, and with the Bulls coming close to their peak. Then the Boston's, the Lakers, the Bulls, the Spurs, the Golden State dynasties. Then the Miami super teams, the Thunder now tremendous, rising from the ashes and just, or better said, building, building and in the right way. What's the secret, in your opinion, of building championship teams that can also last?
Well, I think there's a couple of things probably worth touching on. Again, you have to be a little bit lucky, because when you're building a roster, there have to be some players that turn out to be closer to the difference makers than you anticipated. There's got to be, the second round pick that ends up being a rotation player on a championship team. When percentages say that doesn't happen that often. So you have to be lucky. You have to have some of that. That Detroit team actually beat the Trailblazers one of those years when I was working for the Trailblazers. So that's a painful memory. In my mind, I'm seeing Vinnie Johnson make a pull-up jumper in the last seconds to beat us in Portland. So they had some great players. The Dumars, Vinnie Johnson, Isaiah Thomas trio. That's as good a trio of guards as maybe any NBA team has ever had playing at the same time. So you need some difference makers, that's for sure. You need some real high character people, because there's going to be bumps in the road. Any level of basketball during the season, there's highs and lows. You have to recover from a bad loss. You have to keep things in perspective after a great win. I have a brother who's was a veteran coach. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but my brother coached at a number of Division I schools and was ACC Coach of the Year a couple of times, when he was coaching at Virginia Tech. It's, you just have to have good players. You have to have good players. He used to kid around with me when he'd have a guy that wasn't, doing the right things and wasn't so good And I'd say, well, you just got to get rid of him. He'd go, no, you can't just trade him. This is college. You got to work with him. So I'm reminded of that. But high character players make things a lot easier. Guys that are connectors. I mean, Isaiah Thomas, there's a passage in the book, the basketball book by Bill Simmons, where he talks about the
Reading
secret.
it now in Spanish. It's
Really?
thick like
Yeah.
this, and
It's great.
this is from where I have the question about the secret. Like
Yeah.
he's revealing the secret with the franchise player and the two wingmans. Please, yes.
Yeah. The secret is it's all about the team. It's about connecting. Um, Isaiah Thomas talks about that in the book. So that's neat that you're reading that at the same time. But I would also say that you need to have consistency. There has to be a consistency to how you approach things. You can't be all over the place. There's a very famous American high school coach who's in the Hall of Fame named Morgan Wooten, who coached at a high school in Maryland called DeMatha Catholic High School. And he was revered by every coach in the United States, basically. And Morgan could have coached in college at the University of Maryland, but stayed at this high school because that was where he wanted to be. And one day I was around him with some other college coaches, and someone said, Morgan, what's the most important thing for a team? And he said, that's easy. Consistency, to know what you're going to get night in, night out from your group of players, as far as the effort level and, how they approach the game. And I think those championship teams that, you mentioned, they probably had, more consistency during the course of the season than most of their counterparts. You can never get too up. You can never get too down. You've got to find that middle ground and how you approach things. There's got to be some common sense to it. That's not to say that there aren't sometimes the need to shake things up a little bit. Sometimes the dramatic coach, who's going to fling a chair or screams, can get some benefit from waking people up, but usually don't have to do that if you have high character people, if you have talented people that haven't got there by mistake, that have worked their way to that level, and you have connected players. If you have those things, you have a chance to have some consistency for sure.
Let's talk a little bit about your coaching philosophy from offense to defense. And my first question would be, when you build an offense with a new team, what do you prioritize first? Spacing, maybe pace or decision rules? What's the first thing you stress on?
When I was an assistant coach at St. Joe's in Philadelphia, my first real college job, only 2 years out of college. Uh, Again, I was very, very fortunate. I know it sounds like a broken record, but the Philadelphia 76ers practiced at St. Joe's. So every day at 10 o'clock, in walked Moses Malone and Julius Erving and Andrew Toney and Maurice Cheeks and Bobby Jones, like by my office. They walked in the building, changed in the same locker room our college players changed in, and walked out on the court. And one of their assistant coaches at the time was a guy named Jack McMahon, who was responsible, people say, for discovering Andrew Toney and Maurice Cheeks, two guys from not the powerhouse colleges that many other NBA players came from. Mo Cheeks was from West Texas State, and Andrew Toney was from Southwest Louisiana. So they weren't at Michigan or ACC schools. And Jack was a brilliant basketball guy. And he'd come into the office and sit down before their practice, and I'd get a chance to talk to him every day. And one day I asked him, what do you look for in players? And he said, they got to be able to run. They got to get up and down the court. This is a game where the guys that can run have a chance to be involved in, more plays than guys that can't run. So
Paul Wesser type of running? Paul Westhead type of running, or
No, not the system, not the system. And I was in Philadelphia when Paul invented the system at LaSalle College. Um, but no, just guys that could get from one end of the floor to the other. I mean, nowadays I think back to Karl Malone, and you can picture him filling a lane and getting a pass from Stockton for a layup every half. But the ability to run. So I look for guys that can get up and down the court, and I emphasize that early on, and then we move right into like guys that can flow into an offense. So the idea of we don't have to walk up to get some movement, to get some flow. So that would be probably the first thing. The idea of we're running for layups. If you can't get to a layup, well, then obviously space out the court, fill corners, but run for layups first. Don't jog. And it's amazing how hard it is to get guys to run. I mean, to really run. I'm talking to try to sprint every single time down the floor to try to steal a layup. They don't. There's a tendency to, once they cross half court, to start turning their back to the corner they're running to, and they're not even facing the basket anymore. It's just an instinctive thing that players do more often than not. So running the court, movement, shot selection would be, right up there where, if we're going to run and gain an advantage or not, no matter what, our movement should dictate our ability to get a decent shot, to get a shot that's not contested so much. And then
you base this on stats, on analytics when you are explaining the importance of the shot selection. You are coming with some analytical support.
I wish I could say yes, but no. It's more a gut for me. I've never had, I'm an older guy, so we didn't have big staffs. I didn't have 5 guys with the tablets sitting behind the bench of any team I've ever coached that could tell me everything that was happening from an analytics standpoint. I believed in analytics and had the good fortune to work for the Trailblazers when our owner, Paul Allen, was the man who started Microsoft with Bill Gates, and we had the ability to create, tools. But when I was coaching, we didn't rely on, analytics to say this is how we have to play. We have to get this number of shots. We just didn't do that. But the one premise on top of those things, running the court, movement, shot selection, if you're talking about, an offensive skill. And again, this is simple. And there's probably some people that are watching this shaking their heads going, this guy isn't saying anything we don't know. But one of my pillars is just hit the open man. Throw the ball to the open guy. It's very simple. Like, there's 4 other guys wearing the same color jersey as you. Make sure you throw it to one of them and not somebody with a different color. And keep the ball moving. There's got to be player movement by running, by flowing, but there's also got to be ball movement, and the next pass could lead to a better shot than whoever just got the ball. And it's very simple, but to me, that's one of the pillars. That's my offensive key pillar. Hit the open man. It's a simple game. If it's a 2-on-1, you don't have to blow into somebody trying to score on your own. You can just dump it off to the guy that's on the other side on a 2-on-1. The same thing with a 3-on-2. There's an open man. You should never make a turnover when there's an advantage situation. Just throw it to the open guy and let him figure out what to do next.
It's also a good explanation of my following questions, not overcoaching the players to read the advantages that they have on the court. So because you already responded to that, I will ask you, what's the offense or defensive concept that you stole from Europe, and maybe one from the NBA that you brought to your European teams?
I was when you had written me some of these, possible topics, and I thought about, stealing from Europe, and I would say my first season in Israel, I was really fortunate. Again, I had as assistants, I had a fellow by the name of Ofer Rahimi and Rami Hadar, and Rami has gone on to coach some different places in Romania, correct?
Yeah, yeah, we know Coach
And
Rami. I
yeah,
think we have
and
in the audience one of his former assistant coaches. So I saw that being in the
yeah,
audience. So Rami is a familiar name to us.
yeah, and Rami, I love Rami. Very different personality from mine. Very, very tough, very direct, very, this is how we're doing it. And where I would have much more flexibility in approaching players, but loved working with him and consider him a dear friend. And back then, I had always, I had run some middle ball screen actions, in some of the things I did. But back then, I was more of a, the roller would would take his route to the basket, and we would replace him with the other big. So it would be a roll and replace kind of action between the two bigs with the wings wide, and that would be our setup, roll and replace. And he encouraged me to look at what we refer to as low gap, where we'd have that one big man low, almost dunker spottish, and then he would be coming along the baseline in the direction the ball came, and the roller would be going a little bit different route than just roll and replace. So low gap is how I call it, was something that middle ball screen uh, with just one man on each side was something that I had not done before. And I became a believer in it. So that's definitely something that I had not really experienced in the States. Um, and I found it just valuable. And, even though there are times when you to do have a low gap guy going along the baseline in the direction the ball is going up top. Sometimes some point guards feel it kind of creates a little bit of traffic, if they were to try to turn the corner and get that all the way to the basket. But most players, don't have a problem with being able to read that situation. In case a big man is helping, then you have an easier pass to that guy who's low gapping. Um, as far as stealing from the NBA, and this I think is something that was further emphasized to me when I worked with Nick Nurse on Team Canada one year during the World Cup in China. And Nick was really big on this, working on special situations. I mean, if you're an NBA coach, you have a notebook filled of last second plays and from the sideline, from the baseline, after free throws, whatever. And I think most coaches talk about that, about the need to work on special situations and devote a portion of practices to it. But usually, yeah, if there's something that ends up missing from the practice because you go a little bit longer in one area versus another, a lot of times, the victim of that is special situations that you never quite get to. You talk about the importance of it, but you don't get to it to give it the real importance that you feel it deserves. You're going to take the ball out of bounds or going to have to guard out of bounds to start every quarter or the next three quarters. First play of a half, first play of a quarter, first defense of those situations. Sideline out of bounds, baseline out of bounds, offense and defense. How are you going to guard it? Free throw break, free throw break where you have no timeout and you've got to get a three, you got to get a two. I mean, there's just so many, and sometimes you just don't focus on them the way you should. But they make up a pretty decent percentage of possessions in a game. So from the NBA, I think working on special situations is key. When I was my first year in the NBA as an assistant with the Clippers, we were beating the New Jersey Nets by 3 points, and they called timeout, and they had a sideline out of bounds play, uh, last possession of the game. And we're in the huddle, and Don Chaney was the coach at that time, and I convinced Don during that timeout to not switch. Let's just play these guys, straight up, which was like a college mentality more than an NBA mentality. And the ball went inbounds to Albert King, Bernard King's brother, who was a very good player back then. And he took a straightaway three-pointer that hit the backboard, hit the rim, and bounced out. And I realized it was like a fraction away from going through because I had said don't foul, and they would have beaten us by one. And Cedric Maxwell, famous for his time with the Celtics, had been traded to the Clippers for Bill Walton. And Cedric looked at me and went, like, we should have switched, and that was another thing I think that I've learned from the NBA right away, like last second plays, things like that, ball screens, switch. That's and foul. Up three, foul, and those kind of actions, switch. So those were a couple of things offensively that I think, defensively as far as fouling, but a couple of things from the NBA.
Beautiful, beautiful examples indeed. I mean, since your brother mentioned, the importance of developing, not only trading, right? For the young players, especially. How do you manage a young talented player who wants a bigger role than the team actually needs or the team can offer to him? And since nowadays we are talking so much about the skills development, about the skills development coaches, and I mean, like it seems like every single player has his own personal skills development coach. What do you believe is the most misunderstood skill in players' development? You can relate this also to the young player thing.
Um, well, it's a good question. I mean, I remember you mentioned, to me that managing a talented player who wants a bigger role. If we're talking import players, who are supposedly the guys that you're building things around, I always try to let them know that, to whom much is given, much is expected. Uh, and those players, if they're import players on a European team, they're making more money usually than the domestic players. And despite that, they're not entitled to anything. Like they have a job to do. They have to do their job. They're getting compensated well for it. And if they deserve it, they will get the shots. But it's still all about the team, and they have to trust me as a coach that I'm going to help them make more money next year. Getting down to it, like that's what they all want. They want to be on a good team because if they're on a good team and they win, then they are on a better team next year, or they're more attractive to other teams for next year. And I always tell players at the beginning of the season, my goal will be for us to win and for you guys to have career seasons and for you to have the ability to make more money next year. Hopefully, if that happens, we'll all be happy. As far as a misunderstood skill, I'm not sure this would qualify for it, but you've got to compete at a level that is exceptional. Most players think they're playing hard. They really do think they're playing hard. But when they miss a drive and think they got fouled, and they stand for 2 or 3 seconds and raise their arms and wonder why the official didn't give them the call, that's not playing hard. Those 2 or 3 seconds, they should have been sprinting back to get involved in a play and to go ahead and deflect a pass, and kill a fast break. And there's so many examples like that of guys that just do something. The guy misses a shot and stands and watches instead of, like, after he shoots it, like moving into a tag position to maybe get an offensive rebound. Or especially if a guy's off the ball and a shot's taken and he doesn't move to a spot that gives him a chance to get a loose ball that might bounce out of the lane. That's not playing hard. And you see that in the NBA. You see it everywhere. Like you see a guy rotate over as a guy is about to take a pull-up shot, and he doesn't put his arm up to contest the shot. He just lunges at him with his hands down. A guy playing defense where he doesn't have any length at all in a gap. He's just standing there with his hands at his sides. I think there are so many examples of where a guy could play harder, would really, really play harder. It baffles me when guys think they're playing hard. I mentioned my brother again. My brother coached Division I basketball for 20 seasons, and almost invariably, one of his early practices would include him going on a rant, saying to his team, "You guys think you're playing hard, but your definition of playing hard and mine are completely different. We have a different view as to what playing hard really means." And right after building a team, the next pillar of the four pillars that I focus on is competing, like really competing, like where every possession matters. There's not one of those my bad, that's a habit that players have, when they make a mistake, it's my bad. And I was like, well, yeah, of course it was your bad. But you don't want to have to say my bad. That's no good. That's no good. It's that you're on defense. You're supposed to rotate. You don't. The guy makes the shot and you go, oh, shit, I should have been there. I don't like oh, shit moments or my bad moments, Compete hard and you'll play your way through mistakes. I'd rather have the hard playing guy. Tell you a quick story. I have a buddy of mine who was a high school coach for 30 plus years. And early on in his career, he mentioned how at lunchtime, all the teachers that, had a free period would meet in the teacher's lounge and they'd discuss life. And one day the discussion centered on, would you rather coach a motivated student? Would you rather have a motivated student to work with or who wasn't that smart? A motivated person who's not that smart versus trying to motivate a person, okay, I'm sorry, say it again. Would you rather motivate a talented kid, all right, or I'm not explaining it clearly. You either educate the motivated or motivate the educated. Would you like to educate the talented, okay, or motivate the talented, or motivate the educated or educate the motivated? I don't know if that comes across with different languages. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense. It
Would
makes
you
sense.
rather
And
spend your
what was the
time?
answer? What was the answer to that?
Well, I think it's individual. I would rather take a kid who's not as talented, but is working their ass off all the time because they'll get better. They'll get better. Will somebody versus somebody who is talented but doesn't play hard, doesn't get after it the way he should? That's the person that you'll lose with. Eventually, you'll lose with that person. He won't be the guy that can help you win, even though he's probably more talented at the beginning, but he's going to stay the same as opposed to the guy who wants it, who will be, the hustler, who will be delirious on defense, who will do everything you ask him to do as well as he can possibly do it. Like that's who I'd rather spend my time with. So I'm not sure how I quite got into that tangent there, but
You got
I
it.
hope that you
You got
understand
it.
what I'm saying.
No, you did it. You nailed it. Um, one last question about you as a coach, because then I would like you to let the clipboard and take that, I don't know, laptop or wherever, a GM is having on his suitcase. Um I believe that you took over teams during the season, right? I mean, you got hired during the season a few times, right?
That's true. Yeah, I
Uh,
did that in Puerto Rico. Sure, in
mhm.
Turkey. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are the standards you set in week one? No matter the country, and of course, you do your diligence. You find out, how is the situation there, who's who, and so on. But if you had to set a foundation of a culture, let's call it like this, even though many people are using this word and we not in the purest sense, in 48 hours, what would you do first to set the tone, to set the culture, to set the standards?
Well, I shared with you some materials, and what I try to do. I mean, most of the time, if you're taking over a team in the middle of the season, they're having trouble. So, uh, they're open to something new. They're not sure what they're getting yet, but they're open to something new. I would try to explain to the group right away that I'm 72 years old. Let's say I'm almost 72. I'm a certain age. I've been doing this for a certain number of years. I'm not here to screw around. Like if I'm doing this, leaving my home to do this, it's because I love basketball. I love the challenge of getting a diverse group of people connected somehow. And I would give them examples of things that are important to me. Uh, their appreciation for trying to become a team, be connected. Again, it comes the code that I believe in. The fact that we have to compete at a pursue a championship level of competition. Um, we have to be focused on playing defense as if each possession truly cares, truly is important. Um, and you have to be unselfish. Like if we can check off those four boxes every time we play, then we'll have a chance. We'll have a chance. And that's what's important to me. That you are here as a team. You'll compete. You'll play defense. You'll hit the open man, and that's what I'm expecting. I don't. You don't need to do anything super special other than focus on those things. Be a good teammate. Um, work your ass off every day. Um, play defense and hit the open man. It sounds simple. It sounds trite, but that's basketball. That's basketball on any. You can't figure out a scheme to guard a certain action unless you have that. Unless you have guys that want to play defense. You could show 17,000 plays. You can teach different defenses, but that's not what coaching really is. Coaching is getting a group to do more than they're capable of doing, uh, and to be able to do things that they couldn't do without you. And the most important one to me is to be a team. To be a team. My last coaching job in Puerto Rico, we had in Santurce, we had a good team, good players, I should say, and we had a lot of changes, which makes it difficult to really have a connected group. And we had one player who was very talented, very talented. Um, but he almost every game would start out as he walked on the court by walking by me or one of the assistant coaches and saying, "Make sure you get me the ball a bunch today. Make sure you get me the ball a lot." So his focus before every game was about him. It wasn't about the team. And we're coming down to the very end of the season and trying to qualify for the playoffs. We need one win in our last three games. One win. That's it. And we're in the playoffs. And in one of those games, we're down 2. There's like 20 seconds to go, and he's got the ball in his hands, and he dribbles it for 18 seconds in the same spot and takes a step back 3 and misses. So that's one of the shots we had to be in the playoffs. He had gotten into an argument with a player at the end of a previous game, and they had suspended him for one of the games. So he wasn't even part of the team for one of the games that we lost in the last possession. And then in the final chance for us to qualify, he is complaining about not getting the ball in the first half, and we've got like a battle in the locker room. No fists, but angry players against each other because, he's trying to take over the game as opposed to, being a team. And now we got to go play the last 20 minutes of the most important 20 minutes of the season. And we've got this flare up, which certainly wasn't indicative of a good team. So, team is what it's about. It's that simple. Simple stuff. Being a team, competing, defending, hit the open man.
Mm. Okay, let's let the clipboard and let's go back to the front office. Don't worry, I will not put you in the ludicrous situation of the NIL today, even though it should be a topic to address it because we were listening to the statements of Coach Calipari, of Coach Iso, and I mean, what's going on over there? It's hilarious, we must say. But let's discuss about normal basketball, professional basketball. What do you think are the top 5 mistakes clubs make when signing players, or GMs, sports directors, make when signing players? Top five,
Well,
top 3. Let's go for the top
yeah,
three. Let's
I
go
would
for the
I
top
would
three.
say I would say one, relying on statistics, maybe too much. They're an important piece of information, but as I learned one time when I was a scout with the Trailblazers, traveling around with a bunch of older NBA scouts. There was a gentleman named Dick McGuire whose jersey hangs in Madison Square Garden, who was a Knick All-Star and Hall of Fame player. And he would always say, "Well, every team has a high scorer." Like that does. If you're the high scorer on your team, that doesn't really mean that much because every team has one. Relying on stats more than they should, as opposed to like the eye test of seeing what a player can really do. You got to find players that have what I say are a feel for the game. That it's obvious that they have a feel for basketball. That they make the simple plays. An advantage situation leads to a good shot, not a careless play or a risky play. There's a 2-on-1 where you should score easily, and someone throws a lob pass, that is difficult to handle for a dunk attempt instead of, making the guy either play you to dump it off to the other guy or taking it all the way. So stats is one thing. I think you have to talk to a lot of people. You have to talk to a lot of people that know the player and not their own coach. Or you can talk to their own coach, but most coaches are very, they're appreciative of the player that you're considering. He played for them in college. They want to help the guy. So they're going to tell you the positive things about the guy. They don't want anybody to know they might have said anything negative, so they don't. But talk to other people. Talk to the competitors of that player, guys that played against that kid for a couple of years, that have scouted him, that know more about him, but they don't owe that kid any favors, so they might tell you some things that are important. I think you should try to find guys that come from a winning program. More often than not, they've been taught good things. It's not always the case. Sometimes, they can come from a great program, but, it's been a little bit easier for them to exist there because, they just have all the facilities and everything, and then they can't quite make the adjustment. I've passed on players in some seasons that I knew or I felt would have a problem adjusting to going from a facility with an amazing locker room and all the people waiting on a player hand and foot to changing in a closet, in a locker room the size of a closet, and that's where they are. Some guys just can't make the adjustment. They start to wonder, why am I doing this? I used to have all these other, things that made my life easier and more enjoyable with the team, locker rooms, masseuse, all that kind of stuff. And now I find myself taping my own ankles, getting, doing all those, things you need to do to maintain yourself physically without the aid of a good trainer or people waiting on me hand and foot. So I think you got to make sure you delve into the character of the guy and whether he can make that adjustment. Does he love the game still? This is probably more for the older players. There's some guys that are ex-NBA guys that all of a sudden are looking to still play. And then, they get to a situation that has nothing to do with riding in a private jet, or getting, $150 a day meal money. All of a sudden, they're driving, 4 hours to play a game somewhere on a team bus or in a van or something like that. It's a tough adjustment for some players. It's not. I would say that they got to be concerned about that. The character of the player and the adjustment he's going to have to make. Speak to opponents. Not just the head coach or the coaches that coach the player that like him. Don't rely too much on stats, I guess. Factor them, but it's got to be more than that.
And thinking that this is the last question before your spotlight moment. Thinking that many people's, many teams do have money for one superstar, for one franchise player, and these players are coming with some, headaches attached, especially for the GMs, for the coaches. But you want the best, so you believe that investing more money, you're getting the better player, at least stats wise or CV wise, and so on. But dealing with tough characters is not easy. So we cannot end this webinar without asking about a player who came from Georgetown, drafted by you, by his name Allen Iverson. So, and I mean, referring to the price management, to the maintaining the peace in the locker room or between the superstar and the coach, and understanding from where the players come from and his importance as a manager, as an executive, not as a coach. How do you deal with this? And of course, we are waiting all for some Allen Iverson examples because you might have a few, right?
Well, first I would say I'm a huge, huge supporter of Allen Iverson, and that his portrayal, how he's been portrayed over the course of his career, from the time people took notice of him. Okay, I think it's been extremely, for the most part, extremely unfair. I think that there's not a player that was in a locker room with Allen or a teammate of his that doesn't respect him and doesn't speak fondly of him. If you were to take the transcripts of Allen Iverson's interviews and just read the transcripts, you would find them to be enlightening, honest, uh, positive in many ways, but just you would say this is all truthful. It's all truthful. Um, and I don't think people give him enough credit for for being a good guy, for being a good guy who came from a very, very tough, rough background. Uh, and yeah, he would say, he'd be the first to say, yeah, I made some mistakes. I've done some knucklehead things. I was young, never had anything in my life. And then I had money, and I probably could have done things differently. And I've made mistakes, and it's cost me. But um, who hasn't made mistakes? Who at my age, who hasn't made mistakes? I went from having nothing to having, a lot. And, you know, I had friends that stood by me when things were bad, and I didn't get rid of them. Yeah. What some people call his posse, he would call my friends. The posse has a bad connotation, but, you know, they were his friends. They were childhood friends that all had a bond that said, if one of us makes it, we all make it. We all make it. And to me, that's admirable. That to me, that's a sign of being, a loyal friend. Um, Now, maybe at some point, you got to have a little more separation because you're all adults and you all have to move on in some ways. And you don't want to have freeloaders, guys just hanging on because he can, make it easy for them to have things they wouldn't normally have. But Allen always played hard. He always played hard. He would say, I try to make every possession, play every possession as if it was my last. And for the most part, he played his tail off. He played hard, and his teammates loved him. And most of the coaches that had him, you know, liked him too. Um, and you can't imagine what it was like for that young man when he was a high school student, and ended up in a fight in a bowling alley. And of all the people involved, he was the one who ended up spending time in jail. I mean, it was a scene out of To Kill a Mockingbird. It wasn't something that should have ever happened like that. Luckily, he was pardoned later on, and John Thompson saved his life. Um, and Allen, was always maintained loyalty to the people that were with him, visiting him in prison, and I have nothing but positive things to say about him. He made some mistakes. I mean, the only thing that really one time bothered me that season, his rookie year, was like right around Thanksgiving time, and he didn't show up back in Philly as we were going to take off by plane to play a game right after Thanksgiving, and I had to make a phone call to his home and say, you better get to Detroit, before shoot around, and he did. Uh, so there were times when he tried to stretch things a little bit, but I found him to be, just he can go down as maybe the greatest small scorer in the history of the game. Now, maybe Steph could replace him, but you're talking about a guy who's 5'11", probably 165 pounds, who tortured people, just so quick and so fast that you couldn't keep him in front. He could get by anybody, uh, and had the heart of a lion. Wanted to win. Um, I mentioned Jack McMahon a while back with the Sixers. Jack McMahon used to have a phrase when he talked about players that he looked for also. He'd say, "Good things happen when you go to the basket. Good things happen when you can get to the basket." And Allen was as good as anybody at getting to the basket. I mean, if you watch highlight films of him, I mean, it's amazing how he could finish around the hoop in traffic, at his size, and make something good happen by getting to the basket.
Yeah, to live there, to draft him. What did you feel that night when Philadelphia 76ers select Allen Iverson?
Yeah.
What was the feeling? Can you go back
Yeah,
to that?
we spent a lot of time, before making that decision. We worked him out twice. The first time he worked out, just to get a feel for him, he was very, very impressive. But we also had workouts with guys like Ray Allen, who was very impressive, Stephon Marbury, who was very impressive. Uh, we had Marcus Cambion, I believe. Uh, we had Allen, and we had Kobe Bryant. And Kobe was incredible, but I didn't have the guts to draft a high school kid versus Allen that high with the number one pick. But Allen worked out great, and then we decided, you know what, let's bring him in one more time, and we with the premise, all right, I really want to see you go full speed today. Every drill we did with him, we want you to go full speed, just to see if he would respond to that, and he did. The team had Derek Coleman and Clarence Weatherspoon and Jerry Stackhouse. Those were the three starters that were coming back. So we had a hole at center, and we had a hole at a ball handler, a primary attack kind of guy. So we were looking at only players at those positions. Marcus Camby was the only center-ish kind of player. The other guys were guards pretty much. So we felt comfortable. Using the pick. It wasn't like last minute decision. We sort of had made the decision, and then we were waiting to see if something made us change. And we liked other players. We liked Marbury, as a point guard. Kobe was probably, he had a tremendous workout. He was from Philadelphia, so he just had to drive to the gym. But he was incredible. But again, the idea of a high school kid versus, someone I had seen play already in college, I just wasn't comfortable. Looking back, you could make the argument that Kobe could have gone number one and could have been the right pick. There's always a part of me that thinks we should have made a trade and got another pick before Charlotte would have picked him for the Lakers. That would have been interesting history-wise to see a backcourt of Kobe and Allen Iverson trying to play together for the beginning of their careers. But it's just a what if.
Yeah, and anyway, there is only one Allen Iverson and one Kobe Bryant. Yeah, we cannot imagine, to have both of them in the same team in that time. But you lived next to someone who transcended basketball because his impact was way, way off those white lines, and he's an icon. He's an icon, and how people are talking about him now, and how real stuff, his highlights, are still like fire. If you watch them in 2026, they still will be like, wow. So I would like to. We have also a few questions, but actually we have like, yeah, two, three questions. Do you prefer to take the questions now, or you want to give the moment to this, let's say, your field, where I just listen, however you prefer? Because
Well,
we had like 1 hour and a half, so
yeah, I would say, all I would say is you had mentioned, a favorite topic, and I would mention the fact that, the code that I already mentioned a number of times, I believe in those four things, team, compete, uh, defend, hit the open man. I believe those things. But I would say that there's like a quick story, and then we can go on to the questions. There's a famous fella in the rural area of the state I live in Virginia. His name is Wayne Henderson. And Wayne has nothing to do with basketball other than the fact that he likes it. He likes it as a fan. But what he really does is he makes guitars. And he's one of the world's greatest guitar makers. And there's a book that's written by a guy named Alan St. Clair that it's titled Building Clapton's Guitar, where Wayne Henderson is charged with building 2 guitars for Eric Clapton. And they asked him, how do you make a great guitar? And I relate that to the question of how do you make a great basketball team? And he says, you find some really good wood. And I guess for making guitars, Appalachian spruce or Brazilian rosewood are 2 types of woods, trees that apparently make the best guitars. And he says, you get that good wood, and you get yourself a whittling knife that you can carve that wood, and you cut away everything that isn't a guitar. And I kind of use that in my basketball, psyche, by saying, put together a group of athletes, hopefully talented people, get them in the gym. Hopefully they love the game and they want to work, right? And you just start cutting away everything that's bad basketball, whether it's poor shot selection, lack of attention to details on defense, poor execution, not running the court, whatever it may be. But just don't accept anything but total effort and attention to doing things the way they should be done. If you allow something in practice, then you're endorsing it. You're basically giving it the okay. And if that's not good basketball, don't do it. So if you're interested in a unique book, Alan St. Clair's, I think it's called Making Clapton's Guitar, Building Clapton's Guitar. It's on that materials I sent you. There's a little clip of it, so you'll be able to find the book. But
I'm going to share your material with the hub members. I'm going to add it on our Google Drive platform, and thank you very much for that, because really valuable, and I was excited scrolling from one page to another. So thank you very much, Coach. We are going to the Q&A. We have 2 or 3 questions. Um, 1 second. So we have from David. Thank you for the discussion, really insightful. I have 2 questions. Coach, first one, Coach, looking at your CV, it struck me that you had success in many different places with different cultures. What do you think were some of the principles or ideas you used in every place that helped you have a successful season? I don't know if you might answer on this, I believe, or you would like to add something.
I would say, we've touched on it pretty much. I would add maybe the fact that I probably touched on it already, but just I think your genuine love for being in the gym, to be either inspiring or inspired by other people that are also in the gym that love it. I had a volunteer one year named Matt Winsberg, who on his own dime left New Orleans, where he grew up and finished college, come to Israel to help out when I was coaching in Ashdod. Literally, sight unseen, showed up in the gym. I knew he was coming, but walked in the gym on his own, found a place to live, and just wanted to be part of the team we were having, and never asked for a thing, never asked for a nickel, and just came in the gym every day with a smile on his face, ready to work, clean the bleachers, set up the court, wipe the floor, anything, just to be part of it. And he was an inspiring young man. He's now on staff at Ole Miss. He's the video coordinator at Ole Miss from Chris Baird's team in college. So um, just either be inspired or try to be inspiring, by the attitude you bring in the gym. It shows the players you care, and if they know you care, they may give you a little more than you're expecting.
It completely makes sense. The second question I see here, season 2013-14, you led Hapoel Jerusalem against Asesov Ploiești, who was managed by me. Yeah, you kicked our butt 2 times. What do you remember about those 2 games? I mean, coach, I just want to say that the next season when you are not there, we beat them. We beat them in a decisive game in Jerusalem to qualify on top 32. But when you were there, man, that team, Racy Wright, Kitchen,
Yeah,
Duncan, who else? I mean, Dupree was there. I mean, amazing team. What do you remember
yeah,
about
we had a good team. You're right.
us?
Derwin Kitchen was a heck of a guard. Yeah, we had a good team. Um, and I remember the game on your court. We had a young Rafi Menko hit a 3-pointer in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
right
yeah.
corner. I remember that, which was, a big, big bucket for a very young player at that time. He might have been 18, 19 years old. But what I do remember about your team, and I later on had the chance to coach Gerald Lee.
Yes,
So
yes, Jerry.
yeah, and he was terrific for one of my seasons in Ashdod. He was terrific. He retired right after that, I believe. But like, what a what a good guy, a great locker room player. Um, yeah, he was the kind of guy you want in your locker room. He keeps the locker room healthy, and
We won. We
and
won the championship together. We are still in a very, very good relationship, and with his family, with his I mean, I was their team national team delegate last year for the pre-Olympic, so I found I feel very fond about the Finnish national team, and Gerald did great. Actually, the year after when we played Jerusalem, he had an extraordinary game against Paps Mensabonsu. He posted him. He started with 8 out of 8, something terrific. So Gerald,
yeah,
yeah, an amazing guy.
he knew how to score down low. If you threw him the
Oh
ball
yeah,
down low, he knew how to
just
score.
feed the ball to the big fella. Okay, Dimitri is asking, would Kobe sign with the Sixers? Wasn't the Lakers the only option?
uh, he was drafted by, again, I mentioned Charlotte, who had traded Divac for Divac, but that was Jerry West, 100%. He believed after watching Kobe work out in LA that he would be an exceptional player. I think Jerry had said he had never seen a guy work out like that. And I think they brought Michael Cooper, who had already retired, but was, previously an all NBA defensive player. Uh, they brought him in to work out against Kobe to see if Kobe could score on Michael Cooper, and I guess supposedly he killed him. Cooper couldn't
I guess
guard
he
him at
could, right?
all. Yeah, so, um, but no, I think Kobe, he played his whole career in LA, and just tragic, how he passed. Would it be interesting if he had lived on to see what kind of role he would have, as an NBA representative? Because he was
Big time.
special. He really was.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Actually, now in January, on 27, right? 27, 20, 26, in a few days.
really.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't
it's
know.
time
I saw
flies.
it. I know. I don't know the exact date, but this morning I turned on the TV and they showed
Yeah, 6 years in 20, in
gameplay where he had
26.
81 points. They showed clips of that, which is hard to even believe.
Yeah. Okay, the last one from Kelly. What resources do you recommend to build your basketball knowledge, IQ, from a grassroots level to professional level, so we are able to coach good basketball at every stage of our careers?
Okay,
This is
that's a
the last
great
question. It's,
question.
it's a beautiful one. Yes, yes, great one, Kelly.
I would wholeheartedly recommend Googling the name Dick DiVenzio, Dick, Dick DiVenzio, which is I believe, CIO, I believe, or ZIO, Dick
Okay.
DeVenzio, and he wrote a book called "Stuff Good Players Should Know," and he also wrote some other books. You'll be able to see, the library of books that he wrote. Dick was the graduate assistant coach when I was a freshman at Washington State University, when I was playing college basketball. He unfortunately died when he was in his 50s, but he is one of the best basketball minds I ever ran across. And his book, Stuff Good Players Should Know, is as good a book about basketball for all levels of coaching and teaching as there is. And there are a couple of other smaller books that he also wrote. And he also wrote a book about his father, who was a high school coach who won over 1,000 games as a high school coach. Um, that's worth reading as well. I'm talking about as good from grade school basketball to the professional game. Um, yeah, just very, very special. Very, very special. I would go order that book this afternoon if you're serious about that question.
Nice. We already have the link. We have the Amazon link, thanks to Julia. And yeah, so thank you. Thank you for the recommendation. Coach, thank you so much for taking your time to share from your knowledge, from your life and basketball experience. It was beautiful. It was a time that we all gain. I mean, you added value to our time today, and definitely grateful. And thank you for supporting our initiative of Lucentum Basketball Hub. Our community is growing and it needs inspiration. And I think that today, we succeed to add uh, another another opportunity for those who are continuously looking for their development or just to learn something new. Or even though we hear things so many times, just hear it from the right person, from the right voice, in the right way. It means a lot. And thank you for putting another brick on what we are trying to build here, a strong foundation without the ceiling.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I want to congratulate you on what you're doing and how you're doing it. I hope this was helpful in a small way, at least. I enjoyed it. And I wish you good luck. We'll stay in touch.
Thank you, coach. Thank you. Best of luck, and who knows? See you soon in Europe, maybe.